I don't think there's anything more timely or important or godly or godlike that we could be talking about for the next several weeks than the love you give, because that is the reason we're all here. Jesus mentioned in John chapter 3 that God so loved the world that he gave his son, gave Jesus, so that you and I and everybody on earth can be reconciled to him. And Jesus was the foremost authority on love, and he spoke on love all the time. His Last Supper, he was with his guys, and he said, greater love has no one than this, than they lay their life down for their friends. He says, you're my friends if you do what I command. And my command is this: love each other. He called and taught he called out to the religious teachers of the day, the greatest commandments are to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. He challenged his disciples, if you love me, you'll do what I command. And then the commandment he gave, the new commandment, summing up all that he wanted his followers to do at the end of the Last Supper, after he washed their feet and after he really encouraged them and inspired them and set them an example, he said, this is a new command I give you. Okay, and they said, love one another. And they probably responded, well, that's not new. You've talked about that. And he probably said, but I'm not done yet. He says, love one another. And then he says, as I have loved you, so you must love one another. And that will be the telltale sign. By this, all men will know that you're my disciples. You're legit, real Jesus followers by your love for one another. And you know what? It's easy to love when that love isn't tested. Love is easy when it doesn't cost you. Love is easy when it doesn't cost me. And I feel like that is the area in my heart right now today that I am being tested in more than any other area as a human being and as a Jesus follower and as a Christian man. Kevin, how much love are you willing to give? How much love are you willing to hold in your heart? And how much love are you willing to express? Perhaps one of the most famous verses in the entire New Covenant, the entire New Testament, is found in a letter that Paul wrote to a Greek church in the city of Corinth. And he says this in 1 Corinthians 12, verse 31. Okay, Corinthian church, I want you guys to really be great in how you manage your gifts and the way that you cooperate with each other. And he says, but earnestly desire the greater gifts. Then he takes a pause and says this, and now I'll show you a still more excellent way. I'm going to talk to you about something that is more important than your gifting. It's more important than even the things that we've discussed previously. And it's really interesting, the word excellent, where he says, I'm going to show you a still more excellent way. That word is hyperbole, which is the Greek word from which we get the word hyperbole, meaning exaggerated, beyond, exceeding, preeminent. And what he basically says is, I'm going to show you a way that's a higher elevation, that's better, that's greater, that's more important, that's more noble, that takes a higher priority than anything else I previously said. And then he launches into what he wants to talk about. And he says this in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 1. If I were to speak with eloquence in earth's many languages and in the heavenly tongues of angels, yet I didn't express myself with love, my words would be reduced to the hollow sound and nothing more than a clanging cymbal. And if I were to have the gift of prophecy with a profound understanding of God's hidden secrets, and if I possessed unending supernatural knowledge, and if I had the greatest gift of faith, and could move mountains, but had never learned to love, then I am nothing. And if I were to be so generous as to give away everything I owned to feed the poor, and to offer my body to be burned as a martyr, without the pure motive of love, I would gain nothing of value. And that's his mic drop moments. He takes a pause, he picks the mic back up, and then talks about the exultant qualities of love. This is job number one. And the challenge and the question is, what level of love are you willing to give to those around you and to the world? Or have you reached your max? Hey, I've loved as much as I can, and I'm not going to go beyond that. If so, that is not in keeping with what the Holy Spirit is asking of us at this time. You know, we lost an heroic, genuine American hero and civil rights icon last week when John Lewis passed away. He was 80 years old, and he was a living monument, a living testimony to the heroism of those that fought in the civil rights movement in the 60s and those that had come before. And I was so inspired, and I know many of us were, to look at all the things he did. And you saw all this archival footage, this history right there on the video and history on the page with him as a young man, being inspired by Rosa Parks, being inspired by Martin Luther King, and joining the cause when he's 17, 18 years old. And you see these pictures when he's in his early 20s, and he's at these sit-ins in these segregated southern cities, and they're sitting there in these situations, and they're supposed to be white only and colored only. And they are peacefully protesting, and they're taught that you cannot respond if someone is violent, if someone spews the most virulent racist hatred in your face, spits on you, assaults you, strikes you, that you are not to strike back. You are not to curse them back. You are not to treat them in kindness. You are not to take in the hate that they express. But you are to love. And for those of us that think love is a soft virtue, for those of us that think it 1 Corinthians 13 is just something that, you read at weddings and it's nice. Love is the hardest thing. Hey, as Martin Luther King, it's the strong person that loves. It's the coward and the weak that uses violence. It's the strong person that does not treat an enemy with hatred, but with love. Now, love is not passive. Those bus boycotts, those sit-ins, that was not passivity. That was nonviolent, loving action. And it still is the high bar in terms of, I believe, how we need to conduct ourselves in our society, let alone as Christians. You show me a higher love ethic in the 20th century or in the 21st century than those involved in that movement expressed. I would love to see it. I don't believe it exists. I think it's an upward calling. And some have said that we're living right now, perhaps in the second civil rights movement of this era, certainly the first in the 21st century, the second since the 60s, the first in this century. And I believe God is calling us to love each other more deeply in the church and to love those outside, not by being passive, by standing up for what is right and against what's wrong, but from a heart of love. So the question is, how's the love you're giving right now? So I don't want to talk about the love I'm getting. I want to talk about the love I'm not getting. And I'm not advocating that you just need to, accept loveless behavior or people not responding to you in the right way. But I'm saying what God is telling me is, Kevin, don't be more concerned about the love you're getting than the love you're giving to other people, because that is what you can control. You can't control the other. And I love what John Lewis wrote about this subject. He says, release the need to hate, to harbor division, and the enticement of revenge. Release all bitterness. Hold only love, only peace in your heart, knowing that the battle of good to overcome evil is already won. And so John Lewis speaks to us, having passed on, to call us to be known for the love we give, the love you give. And that in the face of hate, we'll respond with love. Martin Luther King said this: agape is something of the understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill for all men. I love just the poetry and the flow of that description of agape love. It's a love that seeks nothing in return. And when you rise to love on this level, you begin to love men, not because they are likable, but because God loves them. And he goes on and says, and he might be the worst person you've ever met, and yet you still choose to love them. So that's where we are, turning point. Can I love somebody that doesn't seem to get me or care about what I'm going through? Can I love someone that still needs convincing that there's a problem going on these days? Can I love someone that with whom I disagree vehemently about the most important topics of the day? Maybe I can express the virtue of love that it's not self-seeking. In other words, my agenda is not what's most important to me, but perhaps it's what's best for somebody else. So that's what we're going to be looking at the next several weeks. You know, we did start the year and our theme was love, serve, give, share. Everybody remember that hashtag? So it took us a minute to remember it and get the virtues in order. And I think the Spirit is reminding us what he called us to in January of this year is the same thing that's important in July of this year. It's still about loving, serving, giving, and sharing. And so that's what we're going to be discussing for the next several weeks. I want to challenge you and encourage you as we close out to think about the love that you're giving now. Who's someone that you can give more love to than you have? Who perhaps is someone you've been withholding love from? Who's someone that's made you mad, hurt your feelings, angered you, that you can choose to express love to? Think about that. Find somebody and do that this week. And then tune in next Sunday for part 2 of The Love You Give.